We all want to feel peace in our lives. Peace in our choices, our beliefs, our relationships, and our environment. I've learned that this desired contentment is often found through holding on to less. When we pare down what we own, what we consume, and what we value, we're left with what's intentional, a personalized curation of what is important and true and useful to us. I'm Shannon Leyko, and you're listening to Paring Down, a podcast aimed at helping you declutter not only your home, but any area of your life that's overwhelming. Here, we're having interesting and honest conversations about the physical and mental clutter that drowns out what truly matters to each of us. And together, we'll learn how to pare it all down, not for the sake of perfection or becoming rigid, rather so we can move through life with less overwhelm and more joy, wisdom, and peace. Hey everyone, welcome back to Paring Down. I made a really big fun announcement this week, and it has just been a joy putting it out into the world. If you missed the announcement on Instagram or in my newsletter, actually it's coming out tomorrow in my newsletter, but I signed with a literary agent. This has been a dream of mine for so many years. I wrote a book back in 2019, 2020. And I self-published that book. It's called You're Completely Normal, Trading Where You Think You Should Be for Where You Want to Go. It's all about how there's no such thing as a timeline in life. So it's debunking this feeling of being behind. Well, that was a lot of fun to write. And it was really cool to be able to go through the self-publishing process and, be a legitimate author. However, I always have wanted to get a literary agent, sell a book to a big publisher and, get it on shelves and really make it a career and reach way more people than I could as a self-published author. And so I signed with a literary agent, which is the first step to making that happen. It's a huge step to making that happen. And so much of that is thanks to you guys. Without this podcast, my literary agent wouldn't believe that the publishers would have a reason to buy this book, to believe that people would be interested in reading it, and having you all as a really devoted and wonderful and kind and engaged audience is a huge reason why my literary agent took me on. And so thank you. You have made so much of my dreams come true already. You're continuing to make my dreams come true. And it's not even about me, right? Like, this is about all of us working in our own homes and our own lives to declutter and pare down to what's really important to us. And so I hope that remains the center of everything, but it sure doesn't hurt that it is helping me personally reach some really fun goals. So thank you so much. The next step will be my literary agent then pitching this proposal that I had pitched her. Right now, we're working through edits together to make it even better. And then she's going to pitch the proposal to the publishing houses this fall. So if you want to find out, be the first to find out, I should say, that I land a book deal, God willing, then make sure you sign up for the Less Express. That's my weekly newsletter where I tell you what's new on the podcast. It's short and sweet, give you a quote that I find really inspirational to help you declutter or live more intentionally. I write a personal note from me to you, and then I end with a decluttering challenge for the week. So it is short, it is sweet, and it is where you'll be the first to know what's going on with this book journey. But let's dive into today's subject, which is harnessing the power of enthusiasm. I have been told that I am a very enthusiastic person, and I take pride in that. And I think that one of the worst things you can do is be rude or make fun of somebody who's enthusiastic about something. There's a quote, I'm not going to say it perfectly, but it's basically there's no one worse than the person that makes fun of someone who's excited about something, something along those lines. If someone is excited about Star Wars, you better let them be excited. If they're excited about Taylor Swift, you let them be excited. If they're excited about, I don't know, whatever book they're reading, let them be excited. Like that, it's just such an important part, not only of our own souls, but of encouraging other people. And enthusiasm is part of what makes life so great. We can't really be happy without being enthusiastic, right? We're enthusiastically joyful. Now, I know that enthusiasm isn't a word you normally hear in the context of decluttering, but it should be. And I want to get it there. I want us to leave today feeling really enthusiastic about decluttering, or at least enthusiastic about becoming enthusiastic. about decluttering. So stay with me because I actually think this might be one of the most powerful tools that we have, not just in our homes, but in life in general. And case in point is that a couple weeks ago, I shared an Instagram carousel. A carousel, by the way, on Instagram is just when you have multiple pictures in a row and they might have writing on them. They might not. Mine usually tell a story or have some sort of text on them. So I shared a carousel on Instagram that told the story of my career path, of how I became a podcast host and all of the ups and downs basically of my life, my professional life that led to what I do now. And that post got over 4,000 comments. It was really, really fun, but also there were a few naysayers, and I'm going to bring up what they said. But first, let me give you an overview of this post. So basically, I shared about how a lot of my career breaks came from kind of chance encounters, right? So I moved to New York City after sitting next to a CEO on an airplane who, by the end of the airplane ride, the flight, that's what it's called, the flight, the airplane ride. By the end of the flight, they had offered me a sales position in New York and were like, if ever, because I'd mentioned that I wanted to move to New York. And they said, well, we have this position open and I think you'd be a great fit. So here's my business card. Give me a call. And one thing led to another. And a couple weeks later, I was on another flight up to New York, moving there to start in sales for that skincare company, which is funny because I know nothing about skincare. Didn't know then, don't know now. All I remember is I used the word microdermabrasion very often. Anyways, so that was one thing. Another was even later in New York when I decided I wanted to get a more flexible job. I was applying for different restaurants and I didn't have a bunch of restaurant experience. I had 1 year working at Cheeseburger in Paradise in Virginia Beach, Virginia. So I was not looking for upscale restaurants in New York because New York has restaurants where the servers are career servers. They make 6 figures a year. And so I walked into this one restaurant called Bond 45 thinking it was casual based on the sign on the outside of it. And it was not. I walk in, the servers are in penguin suits. There's these beautiful leather booths. And I was like, oh, not the place for me. And I immediately turned on my heel to leave. But the manager happened to be standing at the host stand and was like, oh, can we help you? As I turned around to leave. And I was like, oh, hi, sorry. I was going to put in an application. And then I panicked and I was like, well, do you have any hostessing positions available? Because I figured you didn't need to have as much service or as much experience as a hostess. And they said, no, but we have serving positions available. Do you have any experience serving? And I was like, well, yes, I do. I have 1 year of experience. And she was like, oh, well, just come sit down and talk to me right now. I have a minute. And I was like, okie dokie. And so one thing led to another. And I started a couple days later at this high-end restaurant. Just over and over kind of situations like that happened. I guess the last big one that I'll share so that I don't waste too much time on this is that years later, cut forward years later, I'm floating down a river on a tube with my husband on a tubing trip with friends, and my tube floated on over to this one lady. You know how you don't really have control and you're like, oops, sorry, I'm bumping into you, ma'am. So she and I started chatting, and turns out she ran the unscripted development department of a big studio that sells unscripted shows. So basically reality TV shows, new concepts. So not casting for shows that already exist, but coming up with brand new concepts and selling them to HGTV, Discovery, TLC, all the big networks. And so she's telling me all about it. And, I'm a couple of Bud Light Limes in. I was like 20, I guess I must have been 27. And I was like so enthusiastic. I was like, oh my gosh, I love watching The Bachelor and I love Vanderpump Rules and blah, 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 or whatever, And so showing massive enthusiasm. That's the point of all of this. So anyways, long story long, she ends up offering for me to come and take a tour of the studio after the trip. I say yes. She offers me a part-time job after that tour. And a year later, I was promoted to assistant director of the entire department, like a full-time job working in unscripted television. So I shared in this Instagram post, which I will have linked in the show notes if you want to go read the whole thing, all of these different career breaks, I guess is what you could call them. The point of the whole post was to talk about continuously living intentionally, not getting on autopilot, saying yes to opportunity. Because to me, that's part of paring down your life, of figuring out what matters. It's, as Greg McEwen said on his podcast episode, it's about exploring broadly in order to then be able to choose between all these broad different topics what actually matters to us and to find and discover what matters to us, right? So that was kind of the point of it all. But a lot of people, well, I wouldn't say a lot, a handful of people said, well, this girl's just lucky. I wish I was as lucky as she was. And while, yes, I'll absolutely acknowledge that there's always privilege and luck involved in success, and that privilege and luck really reminds me of Malcolm Gladwell's book, Outliers, where he talks about like Bill Gates's history. It was super interesting, and how he just happened to live near the only university in the United States that had a coding computer, I don't know, some fancy kind of coding computer available in the middle of the night when there was no one else there, no students there. And he would sneak out of his house and go there all night to practice and to work on this very highly unique computer that he just happened, luckily, to live walking distance from. So there's some luck, right? And there's some privilege. But here's the thing. A huge piece of Bill Gates' story and my story and so many other people's story isn't just about luck. It's about enthusiasm. Right? So when I met those people, I did not have a resume in my hand. I certainly didn't have a perfect pitch. I didn't even know what they did. What I did have was genuine curiosity. I showed sincere interest in what they did, right? When I was chatting with that CEO and she told me she lived in New York and she was the CEO of a skincare company, I was like, wow, did you grow up in New York? How did you found your own company? I was just curious and enthusiastic about what she did. And since I lit up about that work, and then I shared my own dreams about living in New York City and pursuing Broadway, but also, I need to pay the bills. And so I'm trying to figure out what that will look like. I shared my enthusiasm for life, and I just poured my enthusiasm and energy into the conversation. And through that enthusiasm, she was like, oh, this enthusiastic person might make a great employee. And that was the same for all of these kind of impromptu interviews, or when I was chatting with the director of development on the inner tube, or when I went into the studio and took the tour, just showing great enthusiasm for what they were doing. And enthusiasm really opens doors, right? Bill Gates didn't just live near the computer. That's the lucky part. That's the privilege. He was also wildly enthusiastic about it, so much that he chose to go code in the middle of the night for hours. Right? There's an enthusiasm there that is necessary for that luck to turn into opportunity. So for me, I'm wildly enthusiastic about this podcast. As you guys know, weirdly enthusiastic about it. That's why I have not missed an episode in almost 2 years. So enthusiasm is a reflection of intentionality, because you're saying, I'm choosing to do this. I am choosing to be curious about this, and it keeps us excited and focused and interested in life as a whole, and that will create opportunity, and it will create forward momentum in our lives. So what does this have to do with decluttering? You're like, cool, Shannon, good for you. Like, you're a podcaster now, and you met a lady on a tubing trip. But it has everything to do with decluttering. We can apply this kind of enthusiasm to any part of our lives. Today, I want to talk about how it can transform the way that we get stuff out of our house and actually make progress within our homes and in our lives if you need to pare down your schedule. And there's actual research to back all of this up. The first little point here about how enthusiasm is related to decluttering. It helps you get started. So in positive psychology, enthusiasm is considered part of what's called the positive affect, the emotional state associated with energy, optimism, and engagement. That's positive affect. Energy, optimism, and engagement. When you are energized about something, when you're optimistic about something, when you are focused and engaged on something, that is a task that is easy to start. If you are low on energy, if you are procrastinating because you feel negative about it, opposite of optimistic about it, and you're distracted from it, so you're not engaged, that is a really difficult task to start. So when you're enthusiastic about it, instead of saying, I have to do this, which means you're never going to do it, you say, I want to do this, right? You're enthusiastic about doing it. It really changes everything. You are more motivated. You feel more capable. You really feel like you're going to actually get somewhere instead of being like, oh, this is never going to happen. I'm never going to fix all of this, right? No, you're enthusiastic about what's to come. You feel like you're going to make progress, right? So try this. Before cleaning out a drawer, pause. Picture how good it will feel when it's done. That's that piece of optimism, of enthusiasm that makes you excited to start. Let yourself feel that relief and that lightness right now. Like pretend, like I'm really good at pretending and seeing what future me will feel. Let future you come to who you are right now. Let her into your body or him into your body and be like, okay, how do they feel? They live in this beautiful, not overwhelming home that doesn't take a million years to clean up, that you're not tripping over stuff all the time, right? That little spark, that's the enthusiasm. So let that drive you so that starting becomes much, much easier. Here's another piece of enthusiasm that is huge when it comes to making progress with decluttering. So not only does it help you start, but it influences everyone around you. And one of the most common roadblocks I hear from people is that they can't declutter their home because the family members inside their home are not on board. So listen to this. In a 2000 study by Patrick, Heisley, and Kempler, researchers found that teacher enthusiasm directly boosted students' intrinsic motivation, meaning they were more engaged and willing to learn simply based on the enthusiasm of their teacher. We see this in leadership as well. So enthusiastic leaders inspire more trust, they boost team morale, and they improve outcomes just by the tone that they bring into the space. I think all of us have seen this before. If we have a teacher or a manager or, whatever it is, who we love, it's just more fun and we trust them more. We're like, oh, they actually believe in this cause. Like they're super into this. Maybe I should be super into this. So at home, your energy really sets the tone for how others in your home will respond to decluttering. Now you might say that's not fair. Should I have to be the one to set the tone? Well, no, but somebody has to. I'm going to tell you a little bit about something called mirror neurons in a second about setting the tone with other people. But it reminds me of a piece of advice I got before I got married. Hey guys, it's time for your ad break. Each week I like to say a huge thank you for your graciousness that these are part of the podcast. Here we go. So at home, your energy really sets the tone for how others in your home will respond to decluttering. It reminds me of a piece of advice I got before I got married. Someone just said, your wedding will be as much fun as the bride is having, and you're the bride. So if you're upset about something, that negative energy, everyone's going to feel it and it's not going to be fun. If you're on the dance floor, everyone else will be on the dance floor. If you're laughing and having a good time, everyone else will be laughing and having a good time. If you look worried and upset, everybody else is going to kind of feel like, oh, maybe I shouldn't, they're not going to be having a great time. So if you want your wedding to be a good time, then you have to have a good time. So when the string quartet played the wrong song as I walked down the aisle, did I let that bother me? No, I did not. I made the choice ahead of time that I was going to have a good day. No matter what. And it was the best day of my life. And no regrets having a huge wedding. It was so cool to have everyone I love in one place. But I do believe that was such a great piece of advice. So at home, should you have to be the one to set the tone? Shoulda, coulda, woulda. Yes, let's, marry people who care as well. There's responsibility for everyone in the household. But if you want something to change, why not be the one to make that change first? If you are frustrated with all the stuff in your house and resentful about it, your family will probably avoid helping. But if you model even a little enthusiasm, like, oh, this drawer looks amazing now, or let's crank the music and this will be fun, then it becomes contagious, especially with kids. But this works with spouses too. But let's talk about these mirror neurons, which I think are super interesting. So from a neuroscience standpoint, we have something called mirror neurons. It's really hard to say. Mirror neurons, there's a lot of ers going on there. Anywho, they are what allow us to reflect the emotions of people around us. So when someone's excited or engaged, we feel that even if we're not trying to. This is the idea of how the room starts buzzing with excitement, right? It's contagious. We all start to feel the excitement, even if we don't know what we're excited for. We just know everyone else's excitement. And the next thing you know, the whole room is buzzing, as they say. Or it's, in my case, why I start crying whenever I see someone else crying. I can't help it. Watching a movie The second someone starts crying, I'm crying. It's very embarrassing. I'm a highly empathetic person, but also it's my mirror neurons are particularly strong, I guess. They reflect whatever emotion is in front of me from somebody else. Obviously, we have to keep that in control, because just because someone else is angry doesn't mean you get to be angry, people. Like there is a matter of self-agency here. However, with excitement, this is a good thing. All right. These mirror neurons are helpers. So we need to narrate our excitement. We need to give our family something to mirror. So say, this is the last time I'm ever going to trip over that box. Man, I am so glad this thing is moved. Or look, guys, look how calm this shelf feels. And your 7-year-old will look at you and be like, what does that mean? But they're excited that you're excited. The point is to let your family feel the win with you. This is not the same as encouraging them, which we should do. We should be enthusiastic with them and say, you're doing such a great job, and coaching them along. That's true. But it's really more so about letting them see the enthusiasm you feel when you're decluttering your stuff, not their stuff. It's the enthusiasm you feel about decluttering your stuff. An example of this actually is in my own home. My 7-year-old was really, really, really bad at decluttering. He was one of those kids that was attached to everything. Even when I would get rid of a shirt, he'd be like, are you sure, mommy? Like, can I have the shirt? Can I have it? I'm like, you want my pink women's size large shirt? Okay. But he couldn't let go of anything. His trash, any flyer, of course, any tchotchke, any toy, the clothes that were too small for him. I mean, it didn't matter how impractical the item was. He just was attached to everything. Meanwhile, my daughter, she's 5 now, but she's a little younger at the time. She's just a really good little declutterer. She's just down to get rid of it. But I think it's because she picks up on my enthusiasm for it. And so she's enthusiastic about it. But it was her enthusiasm that actually changed my son. She was doing so well. She was like, mommy, can I declutter my room? And I was like, well, sure, honey. But I like to go through it with her because she's so good at it that sometimes I need to be like, we're not getting rid of that. We use that every day. But anyway, so I went into her room with the box and whatever. And my son kind of comes in and is sitting on the bed and watching us declutter. And she's so enthusiastic. She's like, oh, another little girl is going to love this stuffy since I don't like to play with it anymore. Or, oh, this dress is too small for me. Alice at church is going to look so cute in it. And she was just so enthusiastic. She was so great. And then I was enthusiastic about it too. I was like, you're doing so great. You're so generous. I'm so proud of you. And Anders was just kind of sitting there observing. And he goes, mommy, can we go declutter my room next? And I was like, what? And so we went to his room, and he was approaching it with so much enthusiasm, and he got rid of so much to the point where finally I said, there's nothing left to get rid of. And he was like, please, mommy, please, can I have another box? And so her enthusiasm really, influenced him. And so then it made him enthusiastic to begin. And it was through an enthusiastic posture that he finally had that breakthrough. And now to this day, he is so much better at decluttering. And it all started with that little spark of enthusiasm that he mirrored from my daughter's enthusiasm. Okay, the third thing is that enthusiasm fuels creativity and flow, which are two really important pieces of decluttering. So the psychological state called flow is the state where you're so immersed in something that time just disappears. A person becomes fully engaged in activity. They're experiencing deep focus, enjoyment, and a sense of this like effortless control of what is happening. Some people might get into that state when they're on a run, or playing maybe a sport. Other people might get in a state of flow when they're, collecting sea glass. I did that last week. I feel like I kind of hit a level of flow where I'm not thinking about anything except my eyes are scanning the ground for sea glass. And I don't know, I kind of got into the state of flow. But for me, a big one is writing. So when my kids are not interrupting me every 5 minutes, I can get into the state of flow. And I don't even know how much time has passed, but I am researching and I'm writing and I'm fiddling with sentences and I'm, coming up with themes and coming up with stories that can weave a theme together. And like, it's a lot of hard work, but it feels really fun. And so that kind of flow, we enter it when we're emotionally invested in what we're doing. And what fuels that emotional investment is enthusiasm. I'm enthusiastically looking for sea glass. I'm enthusiastically writing a blog post or working on my book proposal. I'm enthusiastically playing a game of 3-point, a basketball. I'm enthusiastically training for a half marathon. Whatever it is, when we're enthusiastic about it, it's easier to get into that state of flow. So when we're decluttering, we can also enter into a state of flow when we're enthusiastic about it, which makes it feel so much easier and it makes us get so much more done. Maybe you've experienced this before where you're like, today I'm going to just declutter the art closet. And you start getting in there and you have your music playing and you get into this state of like, you don't even know how much time has passed. It might not be that you ever feel like decluttering is the most fun thing you've ever done, but there's a level of concentration and flow of productivity that feels really, really good. And hand in hand with this is the creativity that comes with enthusiasm, and that's part of flow. So in decluttering, enthusiasm helps you stick with the hard task and think more creatively about it. So instead of like, oh, where does this go? You think, how else could I store this? Or who else might need this? How can I donate this in some way meaningful? Or could this space work in a better way if I get rid of, 30% of the belongings so that there's more space here? How could I then arrange it in a way that's more functional for my life? Your creativity really starts to flourish. And because flow involves a perfect balance between challenge and skill, it keeps you energized and eager to continue. It reinforces that enthusiasm through a sense of mastery and progress. So the more you flow, the more enthusiastic you tend to feel about the activity, creating this feedback loop. It's a positive cycle of motivation and engagement. Okay, so we talked about how enthusiasm gets you started. We talk about how it influences other people in your home. We talk about how it fuels creativity and flow, which is just honestly a really important state, not only for progress, but for the human mind. And the last thing is that this is what's going to keep you going. Enthusiasm, it's more than just about flow or getting started. It's that enthusiasm begets enthusiasm. So this process is tied to the concept called broaden-and-build theory, Fredrickson's broaden-and-build theory of positive emotions, but broaden and build, which suggests that when we feel positive emotions, such as enthusiasm, our thinking becomes more expansive, creative, like I said, resourceful. If you're enthusiastic about let's say horseback riding. I was really enthusiastic about horseback riding as like a middle and high schooler, to the point where I'd have these horseback riding books and I would sit there and imagine the jumps. Like I remember very vividly, I was on a field trip once and I had this book about jumping technique. And I would imagine over and over and over again how to like enter the jump at a canter or a gallop and when exactly to get my horse to go faster and slower in order to approach the jump in a way where they were ready to take off at the right time. And then the second that they would take off, in my head, I would imagine the feeling of their front hoof just beginning to leave the ground, which is when I would immediately move forward into my 2-point position or, my jumping position. Because when you jump over, something with a horse, you lean forward, you put your little hands up their neck, and you're supposed to have a straight line between your elbows and your wrists and their bit, which is the part of the bridle that goes in their mouth. And so I would just imagine that over and over and over again. I was enthusiastic about it. It made me more creative and resourceful. It broadened my perspective. I was reading books about it. I was imagining it. I was considering different things I could do, different ways to dig in my heels, different ways to clench my muscles, different ways to move my body to help train this horse. So my enthusiasm broadened, right? Part of this broaden-and-build theory, my perspective, which then leads to success and enjoyable discoveries, right? So next time I got on the horse, I was able to implement everything that I had thought about and was very successful with that, which then built upon my enthusiasm. Broaden and build. Now it's built upon because it worked, because it was exciting, because it was new and different, and I got to implement it. My trainer was thrilled, right? Like it was just really fun. So that momentum compounds with this broaden and build theory. In other words, enthusiasm is a feedback loop. Enthusiasm begets more enthusiasm. So think about it like when you start a new hobby. Your initial curiosity prompts you to try it. Those early wins spark joy, and then that joy drives you to invest more time, leading to more skill, which leads to more excitement because it is fun to do something that you're good at. So enthusiasm becomes self-propelling. Once you start, the internal rewards naturally stoke the fire to keep going. With decluttering, this internal enthusiasm feedback loop can be a real game changer. As you start sorting and letting go of these items, you experience that sense of accomplishment and relief, those positive feelings. That broadens your mindset. Like, oh, what else could I get rid of? Or like we said, that creativity, that flow, you get there and then it makes it easier to tackle the next area. So each small success builds momentum, fueling more enthusiasm to keep going. That last piece of the feedback loop is a huge piece of how we maintain our enthusiasm. But I did want to talk about one piece of maintaining enthusiasm that I kind of gathered from a book I just read called Hidden Potential by social scientist Adam Grant. And it's this concept called harmonious passion. This is a concept from motivational psychology that describes a healthy, balanced way of engaging in an activity that you love. So when you have harmonious passion, think, how I feel about this podcast or how you feel about whatever you're passionate about. The activity is deeply important to you and brings you joy, but it exists in harmony with other parts of your life. You're not over obsessive about it to the point that you get burned out. You choose to participate freely rather than feeling compelled or controlled by it, which is why it can be really difficult to keep harmonious passion towards your career because we often feel obligated. We have to show up every single day at the office. We have to do it. And when we feel like we have to do something, that harmonious passion tends to wane. But when we find that participation freely and passionately, this thing that we do often and that we work hard at really enhances rather than disrupts your relationships and your well-being versus something that drains you. So people with harmonious passion can immerse themselves in their interest without neglecting other priorities. They can step away from it without feeling guilty or distressed. And this balanced approach often leads to greater fulfillment, sustained motivation, and then more progress in that area. We often think, the most successful people are the ones that never take breaks and they go hard and they choose one thing and they stick with it and that's that, right? But there's so much science to back up that actually the most successful, what was the example he used in the book? It was like a drummer. I don't know. There were a couple examples, but even athletes, they love it so much that of course they do it a lot, but that harmonious passion means they can step away from it and occasionally pursue other things. And actually, in fact, in order to be as good as they are, they needed to step away and to take breaks. And there were other things they did too to maintain this sense of harmonious passion so that things didn't become a slog. And we want to feel harmonious passion with decluttering. So I'm actually going to go through 4 quick ways that Adam Grant laid out in his book to harness and maintain harmonious passion. So one is deliberate play. Adam highlights examples like Evelyn Glennie, who is a drummer, and Steph Curry. Most people know he's a very famous basketball player, where their coaches or even they themselves turned rigorous routines and practices into inventive and playful drills. This is more than just gamifying. This is more than putting up a point system. It is saying like there's no boring workouts. So we're going to create a brand new type of a game where with Steph Curry, he had to get 21 points in 1 minute. Or Evelyn Glennie, she played some random song, but she had to like transpose it onto a different instrument. It was playful for them. They thought it was fun to do, and therefore they made more progress, and it didn't feel like they were doing drills. That's the point. It's not about doing drills. It's about making it feel like it's fun, and that keeps that harmonious passion. So with doing kind of like deliberate play with decluttering would be, instead of focusing on how much you need to get out, you could choose 5 organizations that you think are really worthy of donations and say, I'm going to find 5 different items in my house to bring to each of those different 5 organizations, whether it's a women's shelter that provides clothing for job interviews, or it's a foster care center, whatever it is, and say, okay, what are 5 things that I can bring to the foster care center this week? 5 things, whatever. So instead of thinking of it as decluttering, you're thinking about it as this game of finding things for these organizations. Okay, so deliberate play. The second is to take breaks regularly, which I mentioned before, but rest is not a luxury. It's an essential, and we need to do that when it comes to decluttering in order to remain harmoniously passionate about it, or else we're going to get burned out. Breaks really help reset our attention. They spark new ideas. They deepen our learning. And when it comes to decluttering, they allow us to sit on things. And we might say, I am ready to let that go. Or we just have the energy to make better choices, So make sure you take breaks regularly to sustain that passion over the long haul. Number 3 is focus on quality, not quantity. So passion thrives when practice feels meaningful. So Adam Grant encourages worthwhile practice, is what he calls it, which are sessions where you feel a noticeable shift or a learning moment rather than just logging in hours because you have to. This is like the other night when I was working on my book proposal and I realized I was kind of getting burned out, but I was like trying to force myself to finish this one section that I said I was going to finish. And then I finally realized this is not worthwhile practice. Like I need to step back, and what do you know? I like took a bath, and 3 hours later, I was ready and I made so much progress on that section. I finished it quickly and it was so much better than it would have been if I had just tried to like push through. This is similar to taking breaks, but it's also saying I'm going to focus on quality decluttering time, not the quantity of time. Like I'm going to be focused, enthusiastic, and I'm going to make sure that this is a worthwhile session. I'm not just checking a box because I feel like I've told myself I'm going to declutter for 30 minutes a day. And the last big thing about remaining harmoniously passionate about something is you take joy in the process. Rather than focusing on achieving an outcome, the passion is from doing the thing. Now, for decluttering, that might feel silly, but I tell you what, as much as I want to move towards the outcome of having a perfectly decluttered house, I really enjoy the process. I put on a podcast episode. I enjoy the satisfaction with the little pieces within the process of seeing the pile on the bed get higher or seeing the organization start to come together, right? Like the process itself is really fun. So maybe try and think about that. Think, can I be enthusiastic just about doing it? Decluttering feels like such a slog to so many of us, but we have the ability to tell ourselves, to train our minds to see it as a really fun process. It doesn't have to feel like a slog if we tell ourselves, hey, there's joy in this process. There's joy in not thinking about the pains of the world and the pains of my personal life and all of the things that take up our brain space that are miserable. And we're getting off our phone. We're not on our phone. We're not looking at a screen for once. So we can see all these positives of decluttering in itself, of the process in itself. Is it gives us a space to clear our minds and get into that state of flow. And that piece of the process is enjoyable in and of itself. So I'm a big fan of being enthusiastic, and I hope that this episode leaves you feeling ready to change your mindset and to find enthusiasm, let enthusiasm beget enthusiasm in order to make progress in your decluttering journey. Remember, decluttering isn't just about what we're getting rid of. It's about what we gain. It's that clarity and ease and peace and space to focus on the things that matter to us, our passions, our drive, our relationships, our civic duty, whatever it is. Decluttering is making space for things that matter, and enthusiasm will help you get there. Remember the big 4 things. It gets you started. It invites others through your energy to get on board. It helps you creatively problem solve and enjoy the state of flow. And it is a good old-fashioned feedback loop. Enthusiasm begets enthusiasm. Because remember, we want decluttering to be a harmonious passion, not something that we obsess over and then burn out and don't do it again. We want it to be something that we can invest our time and energy into for the long haul, especially when we've got a lot of stuff to move out of our house. This is something you can stay excited about for years and for your whole life and make a lot of progress. Next week on the podcast, I have on Mia Danielle, and we are going to be talking about the invisible elements that help us declutter. It's a fun one. It's a motivating one. And actually, I think it's the perfect piggyback to this episode. So come back then. All right. Bye, everyone. You just listened to an episode of Paring Down with me, Shannon Leyko. If you enjoyed the show, it would mean the world if you can leave a review wherever you listen and share this episode with a friend. Those reviews really are what keeps a podcast on its feet for the long haul, and I will read every single one with a huge smile on my face. So thank you ahead of time. If you're watching on YouTube, don't forget to hit subscribe. Also, be sure to follow along on Instagram at paring_down, where I offer lots of tips and inspiration for paring down, along with what's new here on the podcast. Till next time.